In 2024, British Airways parent company reported record profits, 4.4 billion euros. It's the best year in the company's history. The same year, BA was being ranked amongst Europe's worst for customer satisfaction, worse than budget carriers, worse than airlines a quarter of its size. The contradiction is the strategy, and that strategy explains why flying BA feels so different now. And it started with a man called Slasher Walsh. Picture this: 2011, British Airways merged with Iberia to form IAG, the International Airlines Group. On paper, it made sense. Two flag carriers pooling their resources to compete with Lufthansa and Air France.
This move is seen as a way for the new company to compete with larger rivals like Air France and Deutsche Lufthansa.
The man running the new group was Willie Walsh, the former Aer Lingus CEO, former pilot. His nickname came from Dublin, where he'd cut costs so aggressively that the unions gave him a label that stuck: Slasher Walsh. Walsh had one target: double-digit operating margins. Every airline in the group, no exceptions. For Iberia, that meant restructuring a bloated organisation. For Vueling, the low-cost arm, it meant staying lean. But for British Airways, the crown jewel, the premium carrier, the brand built on service, it meant something very, very different. Heathrow was the asset. Everything else was negotiable. At almost every decision point over the next decade, BA's management faced a choice: protect the brand or protect the margin. And guess what they chose? Margin. Remarkably, it worked. BA wasn't operating in a vacuum. By 2011, low-cost carriers had already rewritten European aviation. Ryanair, EasyJet, Wizz Air. What started as a niche for price-sensitive holidaymakers had become the default for short-haul travel. Average fares fell, margins compressed. Legacy carriers that had charged premium prices for short-haul flights found themselves competing with airlines whose entire business model was being cheaper. Every flag carrier faced the same question, but they answered it differently. Lufthansa built Eurowings, a separate brand, different crews, different cost base, and a completely different identity. The mainline product stayed premium. Air France merged with KLM. They wanted scale through consolidation. Protect the core brand by getting bigger. But BA looked at these strategies and chose neither. Heathrow access and schedules locked business travellers in. Leisure travellers cared about price. The premium short-haul extras weren't driving bookings. The economics to him were clear. Maintaining the premium product made no sense on their numbers. BA cut the product on the main line but kept the prices, and the cuts started in January 2017. On the 11th of January that year, BA eliminated free food and drinks on short-haul flights. No more complimentary sandwich, no more G&T. If you wanted to eat or drink, you'd buy from a Marks & Spencer menu. Prices starting at £3.50. The architect was Alex Cruz, the new BA CEO. His previous job? Running Vueling, IAG's Spanish low-cost carrier. He knew how to strip out costs, but that was the point. BA wasn't matching Ryanair or EasyJet. Those airlines never had offered free catering. BA was abandoning something it had provided for decades, something its competitors still offered. Lufthansa short haul, complimentary drinks and snacks. Air France short haul, complimentary drinks and snacks. British Airways short haul, nothing. Here's the calculation that BA made. In airline economics, if passengers won't pay extra for a perk, the perk is pure cost. Call it about £5 per passenger on short-haul catering. On a full A320, that's £900 per flight. Multiply the daily short-haul schedule and you're looking at tens of millions a year. Defection was the risk. Would passengers choose Lufthansa for a free sandwich? Would they book away from BA because of a missing gin and tonic? At least that was the fear. It didn't happen. Load factors held. Passengers grumbled and the press had a field day, but they kept booking. BA had guessed correctly. Short-haul passengers cared about schedules and prices, not sandwiches. The margin improved. Management took note. If passengers wouldn't leave over catering, what else could be cut? Once again, BA traded brand for margin. The margin arrived. The cost won't show up on any balance sheet. The catering cut saved money, but there was an even bigger prize: seat pitch. The distance between your seat and the one in front. The number that determines whether you can cross your legs or spend 3 hours with your knees in your chest. In 2017 and 2018, BA reduced short-haul economy pitch from 30 inches to 29. Just 1 inch. 1 inch less than Ryanair. Let that land. British Airways, the flag carrier of the United Kingdom, the legacy airline, and the brand built on being better than the budget options, now offered less legroom than Ryanair. As you can imagine, the headlines wrote themselves. Long haul turned out to be worse. BA reconfigured its 777 fleet from 9 seats across to 10, the same cabin width, but 1 extra seat per row. Seat width dropped to 17 inches, 36 extra passengers every single flight. These were paying customers in space that used to be space. So every additional row is essentially free revenue. Fuel barely changes and crew doesn't. Landing fees don't. 36 extra fares with minimal extra cost. That is pure margin. The consequence was predictable. Passengers complained, the press ran stories, social media does what it always does. But planes stayed full. Once again, BA traded their brand for margin. The planes were fuller, the passengers were angrier, but the accountants were satisfied. Economy was squeezed, so you'd think that premium was protected. Well, knowing BA, it was not. Meanwhile, as management celebrated the short-haul savings, BA's flagship product was aging in place. This is BA's Club World seat, business class, the cabin that is supposed to justify premium pricing. Now, it was introduced in 2006. 2007, obviously, the same seat. 2010, same seat. 2015, same seat. Even now, the same seat. Up until 2019, there was no innovation. It was the same seat. One of the longest business class stagnations of any major airline's premium cabin. In those 13 years, Qatar Airways introduced the Q Suite. Doors that close, double beds for couples, privacy that BA's seat couldn't match at any price. Delta rebuilt its entire business class. Delta One suites, direct aisle access, sliding doors. Can you believe an American airline doing premium better than British Airways? BA's response? Announcements, renderings and promises. In 2019, BA finally unveiled their Club Suite, which was a genuine improvement. Doors, direct aisle access and modern design. But the rollout was glacial. Only new A350s and refurbished 777s got the new seat, and the rest of the long-haul fleet kept the 2006 product. For passengers, it became a lottery. Book a flight, hope you get the new seat. No way to guarantee it, same price either way. So why did BA wait so long? A new business class seat costs roughly £200 million to develop and certify. That capital has to come from somewhere. Retained earnings that could go to shareholders, new debt that affects the balance sheet. Walsh's IAG was returning cash to investors. Premium cabin investment was not the priority. What BA didn't account for was competitive drift. When you stand still for 13 years, you don't stay in the same place, you fall way behind. Every competitor mandate made BA's product look older, not by BA doing anything wrong, just by BA doing nothing at all. Once again, BA traded their brand for margin, but this time the trade was visible to every passenger who stepped onto a competitor's aircraft. Passengers could live with a dated seat. What happened to the people serving them was harder to accept. Think back to March 2020. The pandemic grounded aviation worldwide. Every airline faced the same crisis. Demand collapsed overnight, cash burned at terrifying rates. Survival meant cutting costs faster than revenue disappeared. BA entered the pandemic with 42,000 employees, while management announced plans to cut 12,000, nearly 1 in 3. But it was not just redundancies. BA terminated contracts for almost its entire cabin crew workforce, then offered to rehire them. New contracts on worse terms, 20% pay cuts and reduced benefits. BA called it restructuring. MPs called it a national disgrace. This was not BA's first labour controversy. Years earlier, the airline had created Mixed Fleet, a separate cabin crew workforce on inferior contracts. Starting salary around £16,000, less than a London barista. Those crew went on strike in 2017, and the dispute poisoned relations for years to come. The 2025 fire and rehire accelerated something that had already begun. Experienced cabin crew left, not just through redundancy, through choice. Veteran cabin crew who'd served BA for decades took the severance and walked. Some joined competitors and some left aviation entirely. What walked out the door with them was institutional knowledge. How to handle a service failure, which regulars preferred which seat, the small touches that turned a flight into an experience, the understanding of what British Airways service was supposed to mean. What came back was a younger, cheaper workforce, less experience, less institutional memory, trained on new procedures but without the culture that procedures can't capture. The service inconsistency that defines BA today certainly isn't random. It's the predictable result of treating service delivery as a cost center. You can cut crew costs, you can't cut experience into new hires. Once again, BA traded institutional knowledge for cost savings. The experienced crew who embodied what the brand used to mean, gone. Meanwhile, as BA fought with unions and MPs, there was the matter of what they weren't investing in. So let's talk about what BA wasn't doing. They weren't updating Club World, 13 years. They weren't investing in IT infrastructure. The systems running BA's operation dated back years. Patches on patches on patches. Technical debt accumulating. They weren't investing in crew training and retention. BA could afford these investments. The cash certainly was there. Investment wasn't the priority. The cracks showed early. 2017 made them impossible to ignore. Every shortcut that BA had taken, every system left unupgraded, every redundancy eliminated, converged on a single bank holiday weekend. May 2017, Saturday, one of the busiest travel periods of the year. A power surge on BA's data center. The backup systems failed, then the backup to the backups. Every system BA relied on, check-in, baggage, flight operations, crew scheduling went dark. 75,000 passengers stranded over a bank holiday weekend. 800 flights were cancelled. Heathrow's Terminal 5, BA's home, became a refugee camp of delayed travellers, lost luggage and unanswered questions. The total cost? £80 million. Compensation, rebooking, lost revenue, reputational damage, that's harder to quantify. BA's CEO at the time, Alex Cruz, blamed a power supply issue. The unions blamed outsourcing, the IT contractors blamed each other. What nobody disputed: BA had outsourced significant IT operations to cut costs. Redundancy had been reduced. Systems that should not have failed did. The meltdown was inevitable. Years of underinvestment finally catching up all at once. BA promised that it would never, ever happen again. Well, knowing BA, it happened again. 2019, another IT failure. This time smaller, but the same root cause. Systems stretched too thin and maintained too cheaply. Once again, BA had traded resilience for margin. The savings were real, but the costs arrived later. BA survived all of this, but the main reason? London Heathrow. Europe's busiest international airport. 80 million passengers a year, 2 runways, no room for a third. Yet, BA controls approximately 50% of all slots at Heathrow, half of everything, at an airport with no spare capacity. That dominance came from decades of accumulation. Every year, BA operated from Heathrow. It held on to its slots through grandfather rights. Use them or lose them. BA always used them. Then in 2012, BA bought BMI, British Midland. The airline was struggling, and BA wanted only one thing: BMI slots. 42 daily pairs, 8% of Heathrow's total capacity. The purchase price was £172.5 million. The aircraft were irrelevant. The brand was dying. The slots were the true prize. With that acquisition, BA crossed 50%. Half the airport, one airline. Heathrow operates at 98% capacity. There is absolutely no slack in the system. Every slot is used, every gate is full, every hour is accounted for. So when demand exceeds supply, and when supply can't increase, prices rise. A single daily slot pair at Heathrow, one departure and one arrival, has sold for $75 million. That buys permission to use the runway, nothing else. BA has thousands of these slots, accumulated over decades, worth billions on paper, irreplaceable in practice. On 65 routes from Heathrow, BA is the only airline operating. Fly BA or don't fly from Heathrow. On dozens more, BA has the majority of frequencies. A competitor might offer one flight a day. Well, BA offers 6. For a business traveller who needs flexibility, that's not really a choice. Premium doesn't matter when the airport prints money. BA's newest long-haul aircraft, the A350, arrived without a first-class cabin. No first on a flagship wide-body, because Heathrow guaranteed the route would make money anyway. Corporate travel contracts lock companies into airline relationships for years. Heathrow convenience, frequent flyer status, and schedule density. The result was predictable. Passengers complain about BA, but they keep booking BA. Not because the product is good, because the alternatives are worse or non-existent. This is the insight BA's management understood. When you control the infrastructure, product quality becomes optional. Passengers book BA because leaving costs more than staying. The Heathrow monopoly explains how BA survived the catering cuts, the densification, the labour disputes, the IT meltdowns. Customers had nowhere else to go. Nowhere is this power more visible than on one route. London to New York, Heathrow to JFK. $1.15 billion every year, one route. The only billion-dollar route in aviation. More revenue than some entire airlines generate in a whole year. $27,000 of revenue for every hour in the air. BA and American Airlines operate the route jointly. They coordinate schedules, they share revenue, they set prices together. 30% of seats are business or first class. Fares that can reach £10,000 return. Corporate accounts that pay without even blinking. For decades, this route subsidized everything else. The crown jewel. This is why BA's strategy worked. Not because customers love the product, because they have limited alternatives. The question is how long that lasts. London to Doha, BA Club World, around £3,000. Qatar Q Suite, about the same. Qatar gives you doors that close, a suite that you can make into a double bed, sometimes pajamas, service that makes you feel like a guest, not a transaction. BA gives you a seat designed in 2006, if you're lucky, and here's the irony. Qatar Airways owns 25% of IAG, BA's parent company. BA's largest single shareholder is the airline, showing them exactly what premium should look like. Same ownership structure and very, very different priorities. The Americans rebuilt their premium proposition too. Delta One, United Polaris, direct dial access, and sliding doors. Even the US carriers, not historically known for service, now offer a better business class product on many of their aircraft than British Airways. The Gulf carriers made premium travel an entirely different category. Onboard bars, showers, spas, crews who train for months before their first flight. BA's Club World feels like a time capsule by comparison. Once, BA defined what premium meant. Now it's explaining why it costs the same. Corporate accounts that once booked BA automatically now run competitive reviews. In 2019, Skytrax named BA 19th globally. By 2021, it was 27th. The loyalty that a generation of business travelers felt isn't being passed down. Younger road warriors have no memory of BA's excellence, only experience of its current inconsistency. So why don't passengers switch? Well, for me, it's schedules, Heathrow convenience, frequent flyer status that took years to earn, and on the other side, corporate contracts that lock companies in. Passengers don't fly BA because they want to, they fly BA because the alternatives require sacrifice. BA's defenders point out that the strategy worked, and they're not wrong. By the numbers, the strategy worked. In 2024, IAG's operating margin hit 13.8%, higher than Ryanair, higher than Delta, higher than United, higher than any major US carrier. A legacy airline matching the profitability of low-cost carriers. On paper, impossible. Passengers, of course, complained. They didn't leave, load factors stayed high, and planes are still flying full. BA survived COVID without a government bailout. Lufthansa took 9 billion euros from Germany. Air France took 7 billion from France. BA took nothing. The cost cuts meant BA had the financial resilience to survive without any state support. And the money saved funded investment. Eventually. New A350s arriving, club suite installations accelerating, Wi-Fi being upgraded, and lounges potentially being refreshed. Accountants would call this a success. Shareholders certainly did. IAG's share price doubled between 2011 and 2019, all while Air France KLM's halved. The market validated the strategy, and the numbers absolutely say success. The reputation says something else. In October 2020, Alex Cruz was out and Sean Doyle was in. Irish like Walsh, but a different message. His mandate? We're going to repair the brand. £7 billion committed to fleet and cabin investment, the biggest renewal program in BA's history. New A350s arriving with Club Suite as standard. No more seat lottery on those aircraft. The 777 fleet being refurbished. Club Suite retrofits accelerating. Lounges in Miami and Dubai being rebuilt or renovated. Catering improving slightly. Call centres brought back on shore. The hardware is genuinely improving. On the aircraft that have the new product, BA is somewhat competitive again. But these changes get BA back to where Emirates was maybe a decade ago. Emirates hasn't stood still. Neither has Qatar, neither has Singapore. And the harder problem remains. You can buy new seats, you can install new cabins, you can refurbish lounges. You can't buy back what you deliberately dismantled. Over the past decade, British Airways optimised itself into a corner. The cost cuts worked, profits are strong, and the balance sheet is healthy. But the brand equity that took generations to build has been spent down to fund those profits. I'm a prisoner of British Airways. I continue to choose them, and I fly with them 90% of the time. Not because I love it, but because it's what's easy, convenient, and they have the schedule that works. Plus, I'm locked in with the British Airways Club. So, at the end of the day, in an industry where brand is one of the few defensible advantages, that's a position that no amount of new aircraft can fix. It's clear that they've traded their brand for the margin, but they are immensely profitable. For the Sky Digest, I'm Jan. And if I get put on another early morning XBMI A319 again, I will scream. Cheers.